Hey, what's going on, guys? Since the beginning of 2023, Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler has been a massive topic of discussion in the MMA community. And yet it's late November 2023, damn near December of 2023, and we still do not have a date for the potential Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler matchup. Now, Conor McGregor did an interview roughly a month ago that I thought would get more attention from the MMA community. Because in this interview, and we're going to take a look at the clip later in this video, he basically admits that he does not want to fight Michael Chandler. And for the entirety of 2023, I've been saying that I do believe that Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler never happens. I even made a video about it in April of 2023 that I said, look, I don't think Conor McGregor, Michael Chandler ever happens. And with this interview that Conor McGregor did, and I'm just shocked it didn't get more attention. And at the time, you had UFC 294 going on. You had the fallout from Francis Ngannou, Tyson Fury. And I didn't really have an opportunity to make a video right then and essentially say the same thing that I've been saying all year. But now we have an off week. I want to cover this because I believe not only does Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler never happen, I believe I know Conor McGregor's next fight. And I think it's going to shock a lot of you. But I'm going to predict it in this video. I may be wrong. Maybe Conor McGregor, Michael Chandler still happens. I do believe there is a small percentage chance it still happens. But I'm going to give you a prediction of what I believe happens with Conor McGregor and the UFC in 2024. So first off, let's go back in time. Because when Michael Chandler entered the UFC, I want to talk about Michael Chandler for a second. Because I want to combine this and do kind of a video about both Michael Chandler and Conor McGregor. Michael Chandler has embarrassed himself. And he's borderline ruined his own career, okay? And if he does not get this Conor McGregor fight, this is one of the most embarrassing stories in MMA history. There's been a lot of talk about Francis Ngannou fumbling the bag because he boxed Tyson Fury for $10 million for one single night. He signed the biggest deal in MMA heavyweight history with PFL. And there's been talk, Francis Ngannou fumbled the bag. Michael Chandler fumbled the bag. Michael Chandler embarrassed himself, and Michael Chandler arguably ruined his career. And if he does not get this Conor McGregor fight, if he gets the Conor McGregor fight, that kind of lessens the blow. But if he doesn't get it, I mean, seriously, this would be the most embarrassing saga in MMA history. And I want to take you back because Michael Chandler, when he joined the UFC, he's been brown-nosing Conor McGregor ever since. He desperately wants the Conor McGregor fight. And I even made a video about it long before they were ever Ultimate Fighter coaches about why Michael Chandler kept going on podcasts and different interviews and basically brown-nosing Conor and complimenting him as much as possible because he so desperately wanted that fight. And you go back to February of 2023, February 4th to be exact, Dana White announces Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler will be the head coaches of the Ultimate Fighter. And then we never got a date. And then it started filming, and then it finished filming, and then it aired, and then we got the live finale, which was in August of 2023, I believe at UFC 292, and we still don't have a date. We still don't have a date for McGregor versus Chandler, and the season has now come and gone and even had the live finale. Typically, when they do the Ultimate Fighter, they use the Ultimate Fighter to build up the fight between the coaches. They used to fight on the Ultimate Fighter finale. A lot of times, they would have the finale on the prelims, and then the main event of the pay-per-view would be the head coaches. Well, it didn't happen in August. It didn't happen in September. It didn't happen in October. Didn't happen in November and isn't happening in December. So it's not happening in 2023. We already know that. Conor McGregor's been out drinking. He's been out partying. He's been out, taking women to NBA final public restrooms, whether it's consensually or non-consensually. And he just seems like he's kind of checked out. It just seems like he hasn't been willing to return. And maybe that's changed a little bit. He's been saying, oh, give me a date. And he's kind of tweeted out certain things saying he's just waiting for his date. But also for a while there, he never enrolled into the Usada testing pool because there's a 6-month waiting period that you have to be tested before you can actually fight. And basically now the UFC is getting rid of Usada for Conor McGregor. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but that is my belief that they are basically the turmoil between the UFC and Usada based on Conor McGregor. And that's why they're getting rid of Usada. And they basically admitted it themselves. I have an entire hour-long video dissecting a press conference by the UFC and Hunter Campbell and Jeff Nowitzki. I have that on my channel. I'll link that down below if you care to check that out. But finally, Conor McGregor re-enters USADA a month or two ago. I don't remember the exact date he entered it. And the UFC has kind of alluded to, oh, in the first quarter of 2024, we're going to get Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler. And Chandler's just hoping and praying. He's like hoping. He's 6 foot from the edge right now, just praying. You know what? I sat out all this time. This has been my sacrifice. I'm going to get that Conor McGregor fight. And he's hoping and praying. And there's been some talk of UFC 300 could potentially happen there. But, oh, well, then maybe they can't put title fights on the card. So maybe it's UFC 301. There's been discussion of that. But we still don't have a date, which is just outright crazy considering this fight was announced in February of 2023. That is mind-blowing to me. It's almost December. So we're 10 months later, and it still has not been announced. But the UFC is kind of weird, and then there was a whole USADA thing, and maybe Conor McGregor was still healing up. You know, that's been a common trope. Well, he's only taking PEDs to heal up his leg. I mean, he broke his leg, damn near 3 years ago? He needs PEDs 3 years later to heal his leg? It just doesn't add up. The whole situation just stinks of corruption, and you know, I can't believe that essentially Conor McGregor got the UFC to get rid of USADA. But that's a topic for a whole nother video. Michael Chandler has now sat out all the way since you have November of 2022, UFC 281, when he lost to Dustin Poirier. He has sat out over a year already, and let's say he fights Conor McGregor in April. That's where UFC 300 is. John Kavanaugh came out and said, oh, I don't think it's going to be 300. I think it's going to be the summer of 2024. We'll get to that a little bit later in the video. But let's say it happens in April. He will have sat out basically a year and a half to get this Conor McGregor fight. And he may not even get it. And, you know, one thing, honestly, I hate Conor McGregor for this. Because say what you will about Michael Chandler, and he's kind of corny, and he's always with the inspirational lines and this and that. Michael Chandler, hands down, is one of the most exciting fighters in the UFC. And now he sat out for a year and a half off a loss to Dustin Poirier. And Michael Chandler's not young. He's 37 years old. He turns 38 in April of 2024. He's in the lightweight division. The lower the weight class, the less longevity you have as you get older. So he's wasted a year and a half at best waiting for a red panty night that may never come. And then if you go off John Kavanaugh's words, he said, oh, it looks like it's going to be pushed back to summer of 2024. Michael Chandler sat out for now. I mean, that's insanity. That's over a year and a half. That's creeping up on 2 years. Now, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but it's over a year and a half if he waits until maybe International Fight Week of 2024, which would be July of 2024. So Michael Chandler, I mean, how many fights could he had in between there? He could have 2-3 fights maybe. I'm assuming the UFC pays him pretty decent. And on top of that, if you look at the lightweight division, there's not a whole lot of contenders that just stand out as a number one contender. I know you have Justin Gaethje coming off the win over Dustin Poirier. I know you have the Charles Oliveira rematch, but it's not like there's one guy right now who's on this crazy long winning streak who definitely deserves a lightweight title shot. Michael Chandler would have had to win 1, maybe 2 fights. He would have been right up there in discussion, especially considering there's a lot of parity in the division. You know, Charles Oliveira's already fought Islam. Dustin Poirier's already fought for the title multiple times, not against Islam, but multiple times against Khabib, against Charles Oliveira, and lost. Justin Gaethje, same thing. So there's a lot of parity in the lightweight division. There's not a lot of long win streak contenders in the lightweight division, especially considering Beneil Dariush just lost. So Michael Chandler, you know, he could have reeled off 1-2 victories. Maybe he gets a spectacular KO. You know, imagine he was the guy to KO Justin Gaethje, you know, for the BMF title. Not to say he would have got that fight, but you get my point. People look at Michael Chandler, and a lot of people, including fans, have said, Michael Chandler, he's a nightmare matchup for Islam because he's got excellent jiu-jitsu, he's got good wrestling, and he's super explosive and has crazy KO power. Now, I believe he would lose to Islam Makhachev, but the point is, that's a very marketable fight. That's a massive fight. And also, Michael Chandler's only fought for the belt once against Charles Oliveira, and that was a while ago. There's been a lot of time in between there. So had Michael Chandler fought once or twice in 2023, he could be on the cusp of a title shot. I mean, there's not a clear number one contender right now. There's people talking about Gaethje. There's people talking about Charles Oliveira. But either way, it's not like they're, you know, the craziest deserving contenders. I mean, Oliveira's on a 1-fight win streak right now. I know Gaethje's coming off the win over Dustin Poirier, and I'm not sure what kind of win streak he's on right now off the top of my head. But either way, it wouldn't take much to leapfrog them. So Chandler sat out for at least a year and a half, waiting for a fight that he may never get against Conor McGregor. Also, he may win, he may not win. And meanwhile, he could have had frequent paydays, 1, 2, 3 paydays, and he could be close to a title shot. And even if he lost those fights, I mean, I think that would incentivize Conor McGregor to take the fight even more. Because I don't think Conor McGregor wants anything to do with Michael Chandler. And he basically said as much himself. And we're going to take a look at the clip in a second. But talk about fumbling the bag. Michael Chandler fumbled the bag. And even if he does fight Conor, and let's say he wins, okay, that's pretty good for him. But still, it's like, was it really worth sitting out for 2 years when you could have done the same thing? You could have essentially done the same thing even if you lost. If you traded wins and losses, I mean, right now, Michael Chandler has lost 3 out of his last 4. His only win in his last 4 fights against the dead body of Tony Ferguson. That's why Conor chose him to begin with. He looked at the rankings and he was like, you know what? Michael Chandler's the most winnable matchup in the top 5 or whatever it may be, top 10. That's why they picked him to begin with. So you think, oh, he wins one more fight, loses one more fight. You don't think Conor would still take that challenge? Definitely he would. Especially imagine Chandler got chinned in his last fight, you know? Then Conor would be more inclined to take the fight. The UFC would be more inclined to book that fight. So I really think Chandler made a massive mistake and nobody's been calling him out on it. And then you add the component that he's just been brown-nosing Conor hard. Brown-nosing him hard. I mean, Michael Chandler would undoubtedly let Conor McGregor take him to the NBA Finals restroom, public restroom. And I think Chandler would finish Conor. And I'm not talking about a fight. I'm not talking about a TKO submission. Michael Chandler has brown-nosed this guy for literal years, wasted his career at a moment in time where he should be maximizing his earning potential, all for a fight that may never happen. Chandler could have potentially became champion. I know that's crazy, and I know that's a hypothetical, but I'm just saying, all for a fight that may or may not happen, and all for a fight that still could have happened had he fought 1 or 2 or 3 times in between there. He could have won the belt, and then he could have called out Conor McGregor anyway. You don't think Dana White in the UFC would be like, oh, this kid's done everything we've ever asked of him. Conor McGregor's willing to fight anyone. And he said, look at the history. He's 2-division champion and blah, blah, blah. They would have booked it in a heartbeat. So think about the amount of time that Conor McGregor has wasted of Michael Chandler's career for literally no reason, especially if it doesn't happen. Especially if it doesn't happen. Now, I want to take a look at this clip. This clip was at the Tyson Fury versus Francis Ngannou boxing match. And I thought this clip would get more attention from MMA media. I thought it would get more attention from the MMA community as a whole, but it seemed like everyone ignored it. And I know there was a lot going on at this period of time. That's why I didn't have a chance to make a video. I actually saw this clip when I was live on stream. But Conor McGregor basically says, I don't want to fight Michael Chandler. I want to fight someone less skilled. And I'm going to give you my opinion. I believe I know what fight's going to happen. And I'm telling you right now, you are not going to expect what I'm going to say. But let's take a look at the clip, and then we'll come back and talk about it.
Just give me I just want the date. My date, please. That's it.
Once you get back in there, you're just going to rattle off these dates.
I need to, man. If this was boxing, if I was a boxer, yes, after my injury and the height I reached from belts to pay-per-view numbers, they would put me back in against this guy that has never boxed before. If that's what they would do in boxing, to build me back up. Well, no, you get thrown into the shark's den, the lion's den in MMA. That's the way it is, which is fine. But you know, I just want to get back and get active. I want to become the best me before I call it a day. You know, and for that to happen, for any fighter to be the best they can be, they need consistent competition. So I'm eager for that.
You think it's still Chandler?
It's whoever they want. I'll never say no. I just want a date. I'll never say no to no one, yeah? So Chandler is what it seems to be. It does not matter to me as long as I get back in there.
So there you hear Conor McGregor. This is an interview from the Francis Ngannou Tyson Fury boxing match. He was there live and he did a little scrum. And there's 2 important things in there. But first off, he says, the stuff that I've achieved, the pay-per-view draw that I've become, what I've achieved in the sport, they would put somebody in boxing, they would put somebody like that against someone that's never boxed before. What he's talking about is a tune-up fight. Conor McGregor is saying right there that he wants a tune-up fight. He wants an easier matchup. Because if you look at Conor McGregor's career, this is outright insanity. He's lost 3 out of his last 4. The only win he has in his last 4 fights is against Grandpa Cowboy Cerrone back in 2020. So in January of 2020. So we're talking, it's been almost 4 years since Conor McGregor's last win, and that wasn't even a good win. That is crazy. Since he beat Eddie Alvarez to become the lightweight champion, he has 1 win. He has 1 win. And that wasn't even at lightweight. Now, I don't know which division this fight or potential fight between him and Michael Chandler would take place at. There's been talk of 170. Dana said 155. We don't really know yet. We don't even know if the fight's actually going to happen. But he's coming off a leg break. He's been finished in 3 out of his last 4. Doesn't have a decent win since 2016. 8 years since he's had a decent win. Think about how crazy that is. I talk about this all the time. You have to appreciate fighters when they're in their prime and when they're in a special moment in time, because it goes away like that. Conor McGregor's kind of snuck up on us because he's been playing this cat and mouse game with the fans for a long time about returning here, returning there. He's going to have a season. Remember when he was going to have his season and he's going to fight 3 or 4 times a year, and it's just never happened. And then he's losing multiple fights. It's over. Prime Conor McGregor is over no matter what. And he's saying right here, if this was boxing, they'd give me a tune-up fight. And then they ask him specifically, is Chandler still the opponent? And you see his kind of response. He's like, yeah, that's what they're saying, but I don't really care. I just want my date and I just want to fight someone. He's not dead set on fighting Michael Chandler. He doesn't give a shit if he fights Michael Chandler. He doesn't want to fight Michael Chandler, I don't think. Michael Chandler is in the gym every day. Meanwhile, Conor McGregor's out on his yacht, hanging out with his friends and snorting coke and drinking and partying every single day. And he's looking at Michael Chandler and he's thinking, we couldn't find me an easier opponent to return to. And fair enough to him. He's been out since July of 2021. He suffered a catastrophic leg break. Look at the way Chris Weidman returned. He didn't look good. He didn't look good at all. So you see Conor McGregor, when they asked him about Chandler, just his body language and the way he responded to it. And he's kind of already said, oh, forget about Chandler. I want this and I want that. But he's all over the place on Twitter all the time. But, I'm pretty sure all of you guys will agree with me. It doesn't look like he wants the Michael Chandler fight. And why would he want the Michael Chandler fight? Because Conor McGregor will draw pay-per-views against anyone. So it really doesn't make sense to book him against Michael Chandler. He can beat Michael Chandler, sure. He could chin him. He may chin him with a left hand right in the first round as Michael Chandler wades in and squats down with that overhand right. Conor could chin him. But losing 3 out of your last 4, you don't have a good win in 8 years. You've been finished in 3 out of your last 4. You're coming off a catastrophic leg break. I don't think the optimal scenario is Michael Chandler, who has unbelievable power, who is ready to come out and get into a dogfight. I don't think it's the optimal scenario for Conor McGregor's return at all. And you can tell he's kind of disgruntled. What I took away from that in the first 30 seconds of that clip, he's kind of disgruntled, basically saying the UFC should be giving me a tune-up fight. And if you think about it from the UFC's perspective, Conor McGregor's a pay-per-view draw. The longer they can kind of continue his career, the more money they're going to make. So they're probably thinking, you know what? Maybe we should backtrack from Michael Chandler. Maybe it doesn't make any sense to book him against Michael Chandler because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if he fights Mike Jackson. It doesn't matter if he fights, CM Punk. He's still going to draw pay-per-views. Why don't we give him a winnable fight? And then that way, if he wins, he can get some of that lust back from fans and people will be like, oh, I really want to see him fight again. And we don't really need Michael Chandler. Michael Chandler isn't a draw. People like to see him fight, but it's not like Conor McGregor versus blank, insert any name you want, is going to do less pay-per-view buys than Conor versus Michael Chandler. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter at all. So that's why I believe that Michael Chandler's not getting the fight. And I've said that since the beginning of 2023. You can go back and watch countless videos. I even have a literal video titled, Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler will not happen. But that poses the question, what will happen? Who will Conor McGregor fight? When will he return? Now, first off, I want to say, I think John Kavanaugh was playing a little game when he was on the MMA Hour and he said, oh, it's looking like it's going to get pushed back to summer. That may be true, that may not be true, but I think he's playing a game. I think Conor McGregor will probably fight at UFC 300 or UFC 301, which will be April or May, essentially. I don't think they're going to wait until summer. I don't believe that. Conor says he's itching to get back. And again, Conor also in that clip, he says, I don't care who it is. I just want to get back in there. But obviously we can take context from the rest of the things that he says. But I believe that Conor McGregor will fight in April or May of 2024. It may get pushed back to summer, but here's who I believe that Conor McGregor will fight. And believe it or not, he's not even on the active UFC roster right now. The UFC, people talk about, oh, they're the smartest company in the world. They make the best decisions. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I believe the UFC will book Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz 3. I think that is the fight they're going to make. Nate Diaz, I love Nate Diaz. He's washed up at this point. He's not as good as he once was. But guess what? Neither is Conor McGregor. They have the history. There's been talk of this trilogy forever. And guess what? Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz does a heck of a lot more pay-per-view buys than Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler. That is a fact. So in my opinion, I think the UFC is working behind the scenes right now to book a fight between Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz. But guess what? Nate Diaz isn't under contract right now. So they're probably trying to work out a deal with Nate Diaz behind the scenes. You look also, Nate Diaz has kind of turned down an offer from PFL to fight Jake Paul for $10 to $15 million. That's a massive payday. That's more than he's made in the UFC, even against Conor McGregor. Well, what could possibly be worth more than that? Nowadays, if the UFC is willing to try to lure him back, they're probably willing to pay him $10 to $15 million. Especially considering, can you imagine the numbers that Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz will do? Plus, it's a much more manageable opponent for Conor McGregor. He may lose to Nate Diaz, but Nate Diaz isn't who he once was. He isn't the guy that Conor fought back in 2016. He's not that same guy anymore. It is a very winnable fight for Conor McGregor. It's arguably a tune-up fight, but it's still going to be slightly difficult. It's not like, they're throwing him in there against a complete bomb, but they're both kind of in similar trajectories of their careers. They're both on the downslope. It is a massive fight for the UFC. It makes perfect sense. And if they're really going to book this Conor McGregor-Michael Chandler fight, why hasn't it been announced by now? Why haven't they figured out a date for it? And also, you look at The Ultimate Fighter, it did horrible ratings. Horrible ratings. Power Slap on TBS, where TBS canceled Power Slap because it wasn't getting good ratings, was getting better ratings on TBS than Conor McGregor, Michael Chandler Ultimate Fighter. So the UFC's thinking and weighing all those options, well, it doesn't attract all that many more pay-per-view buys or eyeballs than if it was Conor McGregor versus anyone. If we get Nate Diaz, it'll be substantially bigger and better for fans and anticipation. And on top of that, Conor could potentially win that fight, and then we can milk him for another couple fights. So I believe Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz happens in 2024. Maybe it gets pushed back to summer. Maybe we get Conor McGregor, Nate Diaz 3 trilogy in International Fight Week in July of 2024. But I still believe Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler does not happen. Michael Chandler wasted damn near 2 years just to never get a red panty night. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe. And thank you so much for watching.